Hello and welcome everybody to this CNBC debate on Kazakhstan at this business forum here in London. This is actually the very first of its kind as far as Kazakhstan is concerned, and CNBC is very excited to be involved because it also kicks off our first program in the FDI series, our series about foreign direct investment into often new and emerging economies. Covering a territory equivalent to the whole of Western Europe, Kazakhstan has over 3% of the world's recoverable oil reserves and is host to the world's biggest oil discovery in 40 years. It's also the largest producer of uranium, and since gaining independence from Russia in 1991, the country has attracted $150 billion in FDI. But sustaining growth will demand that the economy diversify away from hydrocarbon and mineral extraction. With a population of 15 million, the formation of a customs union with neighbouring Belarus and Russia will boost the internal market to more than 160 million people, with a combined internal GDP of around $2 trillion. Global commodity prices, as you all know, are on a tear. Producing countries are attracting immense flows of hot foreign capital. But are they using this windfall wisely? And is the foreign direct invested capital finding a useful destination? Let me introduce our panel to you to discuss these issues and how you might make a decent return by putting your money into this economy. Kairat Kalembetov is the CEO of Samruk Kazyna. Olivier Descamps, the Managing Director for Eastern Europe and Central Asia at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Sir Richard Evans, Independent Director at Samruk Kazyna and former Chairman of BAE System. Daryl Hadaway, Managing Partner of Deloitte in the Caspian region. And we're very pleased to have with us Kwandik Bishimbayev, Vice Minister of Economic and Development and Trade for the Republic of Kazakhstan. As such, he of course is at the forefront of efforts to diversify the economy and attract new investments. So Minister, let me start with you, if I might. What return on investment can you promise me over what time frame to secure my capital?
You know, it's very hard to promise any return on investment, you know, as a promise. But I could say that on general, the return on investment in Kazakhstan is above average because we are at the beginning of.
What does above average mean?
Is around. I would say it's about 25–30% on investment in Kazakhstan. We are at the beginning of our process. Our macroeconomic prospects are very good. Our GDP is going to increase by 50% by 2015. Our infrastructure requirements are also rising, and that of course forms a new demand for goods and services in Kazakh economy. The demand that is not only on paper, but with the demand that is also has some funds behind it. So I think investments in infrastructure, in services industries, in manufacturing in Kazakhstan, that is related to country's development prospects, are going to be very profitable and stable.
So Richard, we know that corporate governance is a problem in many emerging parts of the world, but you have real hands-on experience in this economy. Share with us perhaps what we need to know as foreign direct investors.
Well, it's the whole issue of governance. I mean, is an issue for anybody coming in to invest in Kazakhstan. I mean, people who come in from the West, I mean, bring very clear ideas of what is required in terms of governance and transparency. I mean, from the countries in which they either live or invest or work. Governance in the West here has sort of emerged over the last 20 years or so. It's become a big sort of issue. We're starting off from a clean sheet of paper. We started off from a clean sheet of paper. We therefore were able to pick up and actually gain from the experiences that others had. But it's a big job driving it right down the whole of the organisation, wherever you work, whether it's the government, whether it's the oil company or whatever. But I think we have a pretty good story to tell.
So Richard, diplomacy, but let's face it, you know the region from your position with the EBRD. Foreign investors are often told it's the cultural way. To what extent does that excuse get applied to investments that take place in the Kazakh region?
Well, I think we have to look at, the long-term investor versus the short guy who wants to ride on an emerging market story. Now, the country has been, since the beginning, very open for its natural resource. And it created a certain regime, tax, investment rights, long-term contracts, which gave the comfort to, I would say, the big multinationals in the minerals. The second wave of investor which came in were basically the capital markets funding an expansive, overheating banking system. And they were financial investors. And I think today you basically have a crossroad of where Kazakhstan is on the radar of the international community. So I think today now you have a government and a president who've said, I want three things. I want to diversify from oil and gas. I want to fix my banking system so that it's not dependent only on, quote unquote, the bond markets and a credit boom. And third, I want to basically create an investment climate which gives this long-term confidence.
Karat, let's bring you in. Do you feel that you have learned from the experience of the crisis and that the new steps taken to support and strengthen the banking system in particular have worked?
Unfortunately, the system was not working very, let's say, perfect way. So that's why when was let's say, leverage in Kazakhstan, over-leveraged time, we lost in year 2007 access to the international financial markets. So since those time, we understood that we should somehow help to the banking sector in terms of the huge recapitalization program, and government did it successfully. So we saved the banking sector. It was not story like Lehman Brothers. So we learned from the issues of too big to fail, and we saved our big institutions.
Daryl, I wanted to bring you in. The message that I've been picking up here is that there's a little bit of frustration among the foreign investment community about some changes that have taken place, particularly the export tax, I think, as it applies to the oil and gas sector. I wonder if you could comment on how Kazakhstan stacks up against potential rivals in the region that might also be competing for my capital.
We've had some changes with the oil and gas law around the tax area. But again, if you look 10 years ago, Kazakhstan was not competitive in oil and gas. 10 years ago, we were trading oil and gas around $18 a barrel. We needed people to come along. Kazakhstan is an expensive place to produce because of its remoteness. So we're needing around $40 a barrel to be competitive and money to add to the economy. So 10 years ago, I wrote some tax laws and contracts that were a different rate. Today, they're being challenged. Rightly so, the government, it's up to them of what they want to put in there, and the investors will take their choice.
So, we've heard the case for Kazakhstan. The minister said we can expect a return on investment of between 25 and 30%, with a 50% increase in GDP expected by 2050. Sir Richard said with regard to corporate governance, the country had a pretty good story to tell, while Olivier made the case for a government keen to diversify inward investments. Kairat told us the banking sector has survived the global crisis well. And finally, Daryl addressed concerns over tax changes in the oil and gas sector. But have our analysts been persuaded?
They managed to escape a recession just in 2009 when Russia went into very deep recession. We are forecasting they'll grow between 4 and 5% over the next 5 years. But it really is a question again of how you're forecasting the oil price and how you're forecasting their output.
Definitely there are investors that we're talking to that probably would say 25 to 30% probably not going to be sufficient for them. But yeah, 25 to 30 enough for a commodity-based business. I think this could be quite interesting opportunities. But again, it's going to be dependent on the type of project and the risk that investors will have to take.
Corruption is not an issue which is unique or relevant only to Kazakhstan. It's more a question of understanding what is going on. And every company has to see what they can do and how they can actually work in that environment, and whether it is possible to work and what kind of measures they need to take to protect themselves from, legal whatever liabilities. In
the past 2-3 years, then we had a financial crisis. We had several corporates that had some issues with the corporate governance, and there are particular cases that I can list. But I think this is quite a challenging issue for the government, and I think this is definitely to improve the investment sentiment. That's something has to be dealt with. And I think they're still quite behind on what they think the corporate governance is.
We're still witnessing a broad legacy from the old Soviet Union, and it extends right across all the former Soviet republics. There are pretty high levels of corruption at state, a lot of bureaucratic inefficiency, and a lot of irritating minor corruption at the police level, for example. It probably has improved a little under a lot of pressure from Western companies themselves and Western governments. They have it's been made very clear that these sorts of issues, bureaucratic inefficiency, this irritating level of corruption, is inhibiting of investment. And generally speaking, this part of the world receives less proportionally investment compared to Asia, for example.
The government, they're trying to of course, increase their the revenues from the commodity sector, and they also try to more or less streamline their tax system. I think it came somewhat a surprise to a lot of players. The way it was done, I think, probably was also surprised a few large players, and it was just an indication that not even the largest oil producer in Kazakhstan not immune from potentially paying high taxes.
Not too far away, we had similar discussions in Australia, for example, about taxes and how they're going to treat miners and are they going to pay anything or not. So I think it's not a question which is unique to Kazakhstan. At the same time, obviously, anybody who wants to do investment in Kazakhstan at the same time has to think about, well, what kind of planning perspective I have? Can I plan 1, 2, 3 years ahead in terms of investment, and when is going to be any payback there? From that perspective, it's obviously something that any investor probably needs to look into and have a high level of safety and comfort before they make an investment decision.
Well, let's wrap up this first part of our conversation in this FDI file on Kazakhstan. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back, everybody. When we come back, we'll try and drill down into some of those sectors of the economy that are ripe for investment. We'll see you in a moment.